What'd you think of the CitiField playoff atmosphere for Game 3?
Oh, it was great. It was electric. We knew it would be. We've had far too many of them since CitiField opened in 2009, and I embraced every second of it.
It was just fantastic to be there and feel that energy, singing the My Girl song. Even a Jose chant broke out with Jose Iglesias coming up. You know, Howie, we talked to you about Pete Alonso even before that memorable home run with your memorable call and waiting to see him get unlocked here. Do you think it's safe to say now Pete Alonso is having his impact felt on this team and he's unlocked?
Oh, he's certainly having his impact felt. I don't know about unlocked per se because, you know, when home run hitters start hitting them, they tend to hit them in bunches and carry a team. I don't know if I would necessarily say that Pete's carried them to this point because he's had a lot of help. So it's kind of semantic, but, you know, clearly this is what the Mets have been waiting all year for Pete to come up in these big spots and deliver the way he has.
Yeah, and the fact that he's hitting them to right field, just his approach is on point and his mechanics are really good now. But so yesterday was amazing, Howie, clearly. But take us back Sunday, all right? Because, you know, Uncle Mo, momentum is an interesting thing. You take off the headset, you get on the team bus, you're heading home. Did you feel like the Mets lost momentum?
Not really, because I think you have to take a step back and look at where they were. You're going home 1-1 in a best-of-5, so you've turned it into a best-of-3 with 2 games at home. And I know I've been around professional athletes most of my life, and I know that they generally have an ability to flush these things. And I had no question, given what we've seen from this team to this point this year, that the Mets would do that. I wasn't worried about that so much. You know, the concerns are a little bit more specific about the workload of several guys in the bullpen, most notably, of course, Edwin Diaz. I thought it was huge yesterday that not only did they open the lead up to what they did late in the game, but that they were able to keep Edwin out of it and give him another day, because clearly he hasn't been anything replicating what he was 2 years ago yet. And I think every day of rest, even though he did get up once yesterday, even with that, I think every day that he doesn't get in is a help to the Mets.
Yeah, we said that. I think you're spot on. Howie Rose, of course, BT and Sal here on the Fan, voice of the Mets. All right, so one of the things that I said now, I've obviously believed in the Mets for the last couple of weeks. I've bought in. I know they're good. I'm starting to really, for myself personally, Howie, I think they could get to and win the World Series. And I cited a bunch of things here. The stars starting to show up. The role players stepping up. The starting pitchers giving depth, catching the ball, the manager. Of all the good components so far, what is the biggest surprise to you about this Mets team?
You know, after 4 months of being 27 games over 500, I don't know that there's anything so surprising. I will say this, that there is a unique chemistry among this group. And I accentuate the word this group because it's going to look much different from next year's group. I mean, that's the way it is now in professional sports anyway. But they know that this is their one crack at it together. And there's been, I think, from what I can see, and it's still pretty distant because I'm only around them and in the clubhouse when I'm allowed to be. But, you know, when things go south and guys have problems with each other, you hear these undercurrents, and there's been none of that this year. In fact, quite the opposite. Every player who's come in has been embraced. And I remember the day that Jesse Winker showed up, talking to him, and it was like a reception line. One by one, guys who knew him from Florida, from travel ball, from any other number of different places, came over, embraced him. It doesn't take long for a new player to assimilate into this group. So I think that the camaraderie, and I know that you can't quantify that. It's a little bit more, you know, esoteric than that. But whatever that is, it's there. And I think that helps beyond the X's and O's.
Yeah, and it's something that's been missing with this group for quite some time, even though the talent was there. And you could argue that they've had more talented teams in 2022 or even last year going into a season on paper, but yet this group has won significantly more than those guys. Is it because of a singular player? Like, is J.D. Martinez having this effect? Why the change? Why has it been so different and unique with that chemistry?
Well, he has. You know, when you talk about J.D., he certainly has been a huge help to Mark Vientos for reasons that we've talked about before. He's been there, done that. Francisco Lindor is, along with Brandon Nimmo, I think the unquestioned, and I'll put them together, leaders vocally in the clubhouse, and a lot of other guys have their say and have played a role. But one other thing I think needs to be mentioned. This is the most orderly, synergistic relationship from ownership through the front office to the manager, down to the coaches and to the players that I've seen in a long, long time, maybe in the entire time I've been around the Mets. You know, when I was growing up, you didn't hear about the general manager. It was a different game then, and you never heard of or even saw the owner. But, you know, the way the game's played now, the money the way it is, they're all involved. They're all part of the process. And to see the harmony between Steve and Alex Cohen and right down to David Stearns, who's just been magnificent. And maybe the best thing David has done is pick Carlos Mendoza to manage this team. And those guys not only are on the same page, but from everything I've been told, David gives Carlos enough rope to manage from his gut as much as the numbers. And we've seen that. We've seen times when he's gone to the mound, waiting to hear a pitcher convince him to keep them in the game, which has happened on more than one occasion. And I know you can't, again, quantify it, but that relationship from ownership to front office to the manager to the coaches to the players might be unparalleled with anything I've seen before being around the Mets.
Orderly, synergistic relationship. What a wordsmith this guy is. I just think we just put that together. That's a fantastic guy. I love that.
It truly is. And, you know, when you think about previous regimes, there were squabbles here, there, and sometimes everywhere.
Yeah, right? I got you. Yeah, true.
There's been none of this. It's just been it's been as smooth as you could possibly sail, however it ends up to this point in the baseball season.
No, and I don't want you to say this, Howie, and I feel even uncomfortable saying this with you on the air, but Buck was a problem in that regard. I mean, those are just things that I've heard, so I'm not trying to rip him. I loved Buck Showalter and the hiring of Buck Showalter, but those are all things that were going wrong, which is why they made the decision to move on from Buck. It wasn't just one bad year.
Yeah, but you got to understand, it wasn't Buck. It was a combination of Buck wanting to do things his way with a front office that wanted him to do things their way. They butted heads, and you know, there were times when it ruffled a lot of feathers. Now, how that translated to performance on the field, I'm not smart enough to answer because, remember, it was a much different-looking team. You had a couple of future Hall of Fame but older pitchers that Steve Cohen took a shot at because he wanted to kind of shorten the period between beginning to build the organization in his eyes and you know, that sort of interim period, and it just didn't work out. But what they did last year was kind of recalibrate. And once David Stearns came in, he wanted the ability and the autonomy to pick his own guy. He did, and that's where we are now.
So we're talking to Howie Rose, of course, BT and Sal on the Fan. So Sal and I were trying to determine what the bridge to Diaz might be today, and every day is unique. Who knows how it goes? So let me give you a scenario. 2-run game, either way. Quintana good, not great in terms of depth. 4 2/3, maybe 5. Is it Peterson? I mean, what do you see happening in that scenario?
Depends where the lineup is. Like if you're looking at the third time through that order, and you've got, say, from the top, Schwarber, Turner, Harper, 1, 2, 3, you might see Peterson there. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you this, I would be surprised, not shocked, but surprised if we saw Peterson mid-inning. Could happen. Takes a little longer for him as a trained starter to warm up and be able to answer the bell more quickly than he's accustomed to. And I would also throw in parenthetically that people who think that Kodai Senga could be a weapon in a situation like that, the answer is no. I mean, I asked Carlos point blank yesterday, can you envision any scenario where Kodai Senga would come in mid-inning? And he said no. So, you know, but then again, nobody expected him to pitch the first game of this series either.
That's true.
So who knows? Nobody's going to say anything that can find its way into print and then have to answer for it later. But I think given all the parameters around what it takes to get Senga ready, I don't think he'd be a candidate in a situation like that. But, you know, again, I go back to the fact that Monday was an off day. Yesterday, they minimized what they needed in the bullpen. Maton, Stanek for an inning and a third, and that's it. So they've got a lot of rested arms out there. Garrett was up once. He'll be very much available. Obviously, Diaz now has got a couple of days. McGill, yeah, when the situation presents. And I think as you create this hypothetical scenario, which could very well be reality in a few hours, Carlos can afford to be very aggressive with that bullpen because of the rest they had yesterday, relatively speaking, and the fact that tomorrow is an off day.
Is Peterson a guy, Howie, that they could pitch today for however long and then have him bounce back on Friday if needed?
I would doubt that quick a turnaround. You're suggesting that he might pitch how long today? You're talking about for a batter or two or for an inning or two?
Well, right. Because I asked the question because I think they're going to use him more as piggybacking either Quintana today and more likely that than waiting for Game 5 or Senga in Game 5. I don't look at Peterson as a guy who's going to come in to get the top of the order out once and then do it again on Friday.
I don't either. I think he becomes more of a weapon to be a long guy or a starting pitcher, depending on how things break down. And right now, if this goes to Friday, then Severino is on regular rest. But I heard Senga's name dropped a little bit, too, when I was poking around about Friday. So, you may want to give Severino an extra day, or problem is, if you try to give him an extra day, it can be giving him an extra 5 months,
That's true. Yeah,
seriously.
Sure.
I mean, you just, you don't know. It's a calculated decision they'll make at the time that it becomes necessary. But again, the beauty of yesterday was that you've got a lot more balls in play in terms of the bullpen today and Friday than you might have otherwise.
Howie, like so many people, I mean, I've consumed baseball on the radio forever. I used to fall asleep to it, right? Listen to you for years. And I was watching.
Put you to sleep.
Yeah, right, exactly. Hey, I'm tired. Put Howie on. No, the exact opposite.
Yep.
And I had to go out. I had to run out of the house for a second on Saturday because I wanted to watch the Mets and the Yanks in the backyard with some firewood. I had to go get a couple beers, whatever. And I put you on, obviously. I heard the most incredible stat ever of all these years listening to baseball. Howie said that in the last 100 games, the Mets and the Phillies have each won 50 times. In the last 1,000 games that the Mets and the Phillies have played, each team has won 500 times. Now, you've uncovered a ton of stats. Is that the craziest number you've ever come across?
It really shocked me and made me open my eyes a bit and wondered whether or not it was accurate. But a fellow by the name of Eric Hornick, who is simply the best statistician in the sports business, with whom I work on Islanders telecasts for 21 years and is a huge Mets fan and is every bit the authority on the Mets and their history and their statistical history as he is with the Islanders, he got back to me and said, confirmed.
Wow.
So, I don't need to dig any deeper. If Eric says that's confirmed, I'm going with it.
That is nuts.
It is, isn't it? And that's going into this series, and somebody's going to be up one game when it's over with.
Yeah.
Howie, when we had you on last week, you said you expected, this was coming off of Tuesday's Game 1 win in Milwaukee. You said you expected the Mets to move on. Obviously, they lost that next game that night, and then the incredible dramatics of Pete Alonso getting them to this divisional round. What are your expectations right now with the Mets?
Nothing's changed. Now, obviously, they could be done by the end of business on Friday as well. But what would they have shown you or anybody else that would lead you to think otherwise, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of why I feel it myself. I expected this after Game 1. I thought this was going to go the way of, the 99 DS against Arizona or the 2000 DS against San Fran, where the home crowd, the momentum of this team, the team themselves, of course, they weren't going to let it go back to a Game 5 to the other venue, in this case, Philadelphia. So that's my expectation, but I was just curious of yours.
Yeah, and if you don't win tonight, if they don't win tonight, then you've got a one-game season in a building where the Phillies produced the best home record in baseball. So, they'll have those people every bit the decibel level behind them as they did on Saturday and Sunday. But one thing the Mets have not been at any time since they started this run to where they are at the end of May is intimidated. I mean, if they don't win tonight, they go into Friday with every expectation that they'll win. And proven enough over these last 4 going on 5 months now that would surprise absolutely no one.
A lot of slow heartbeats on this team, man, which is optimal this time of the year. I almost don't want to push it this far, but I want to get ahead of it because next time we have you on, the Mets will either be moving on or done, and I think they'll move on as well. Jeff McNeil, what have you heard? I know you talked to the skip about Kodai Senga. Anything about McNeil for the next round? What's happening?
Well, they want him to get reps. They want him to get some play in the Arizona Fall League if they can get that approved.
Yep.
And I don't know how that manifests in the next series. If it comes to that, the signals that I got when the postseason started was that for McNeil to be a player, even though they didn't say this point blank, it would more likely be if they got to the World Series than anything else. But I wouldn't rule anything out. I don't think it's beyond the realm of possibility that he could be active in the next series. Luis Angel Acuna has given them a nice little weapon, too, because of his speed, his defensive versatility. Not that needed him in the outfield, which is another spot where Jeff can factor in. But they've got a nice little rotation going now. And Marte starts, and, hey, did he have a big hit yesterday?
Yeah, that's huge.
He had as a Met, right?
Huge.
So, Marte swung a nice bat so far during this postseason, and if he's in the outfield and you've got to lead late because of his mobility issues, well, it's pretty nice to be able to run Bader out to center and move Tyrone Taylor to right. And what a play Taylor made on that bare-hand carom off the fence yesterday. So the way they've got things lined up right now, it'd be nice to take a one-time batting champion who's versatile and throw him onto the roster. If they advance beyond this series, I'm not sure it'll go that way. It might. I mean, I would say at best it's 50-50, but it's a nice little conundrum to have.
Yeah, I wouldn't mess around with it. I mean, he's not playing second. Iglesias is. You talk about the corner outfield. Obviously, Nimmo solidified in left here. I mean, pinch hitter, that's it. And I know he was hitting well before he got hurt, but, they've done a lot without Jeff McNeil, even if he comes. And I hope he comes back because options are good. I'm not moving mountains to stick him in. I'm not interrupting this at all.
Yeah, but the thing you have to realize is that when Winker is in the starting lineup, unless something unusual has happened, say an injury to any other left-handed batter in the lineup, but if Winker is in the starting lineup, then their bench is all right-handed. And I think they would like the flexibility of another left-handed bat there, and that's what could accelerate this process to me.
I got
the fact that when they do start discussing the roster, and we're way ahead of ourselves, of course, but if they get to that point, then that's where I think that McNeil might tip the scales in his favor, giving them another left-handed bat on the bench. If they're facing a left-handed starter, because the way managers manipulate those bullpens, you're going left, right, and obviously they've got to face three batters apiece. But I think they would like the flexibility of the other left-handed bat on the bench if possible.
And maybe that's my favorite thing about this team, Howie, the depth. They have an answer for everything. In years past, it was like, oh, well, this guy's only on the roster because he can pinch run, or this guy's only on the roster because he's a defensive guy, or just a power threat off the bench. Now it's they pinch run with Bader, a guy who can give you a professional at bat and also play Gold Glove defense in the outfield, or they have speed guys that they could put in that they could do other things. Like, this team is so deep. McNeil would be another layer to that, but how about the depth of this 2024 New York Mets team?
I go back to David Stearns and take my hat off to him for that. I mean, this has been a very carefully assembled team with a lot of trial and error, as we saw early in the year. Nobody expected to see Jose Iglesias here after he failed to make the team. But, they gave guys like Zach Short and Joey Wendell opportunities that didn't work out. Iglesias had some things to work on down there. In fact, I was talking to his AAA manager, JPR and Cebia, yesterday. And where Iglesias had been in terms of his perception around the game and where he came to the point where the Mets elevated into the big league roster was significant. And there's a lot to it, not only from the standpoint of some of the stuff we talk about defensively, the pre-pitch and the assumption that at age 34 his range was shot. They also had felt that at times he had not been a great teammate, that he was more unto himself. And then he gets to Syracuse after not playing in the major leagues last year, and he's taking kids out to dinner. He's showing them the ropes and helping get that. He was selfless in the minor leagues in a way that JP was scratching his head about, going, why are they saying what they said about this guy? He's been a model here.
Yeah.
And look at what he's done since coming to the big league club.
Hey, by the way, did Swoboda text you yet today?
Not today, not yet.
Yeah. He's been checking in a lot, right? I heard you saying that.
He's the best. He's so invested in this. And, there's a lineage to this franchise that's refreshing because, sadly, we've lost a lot of guys now from the 69 team. But, the surviving members of that club and even those who have passed on, who lived for quite a while after 1969, they were delighted when the team won in 86. And the 86 group, they won. Ask Ronnie and Keith how badly they'd like to see this Mets team win. Because, they're the ones that are always looked at as sort of that last championship team. And it's always 86, 86, 86. Well, even for me, as a guy who, is on the air every day and reflects back on those years, I want I'm never mind. I'm being 70, but anybody who's realistically under the age of 40 has no recollection of the Mets having won in 1986. I want this youngest generation of Mets fans to have a championship team all their own.
Oh, that's a great way to.
And it's time, man. It's time. So, whether it's Ron Swoboda or Keith Hernandez and Ron Darling or anybody else who's a link in that chain to today, they're all on the same page.
Great way to put it. I never thought of it like that. Last one, Howie, real quick. Unfortunately, I didn't make it there for the introductions yesterday. Who you were on field doing it yourself? Who had the loudest ovation?
That's a good question because they gave a real big ovation to Jeff McNeil. They gave a real big ovation to David Peterson for the turnaround that he's made. And then the guys you would expect, Lindor, obviously, Alonso. We weren't introducing the sous chef and all of those others. So, that's the one that I when I do that on opening day, and they decide that they're going to introduce just about everybody in the
nutritionist, the organist,
lengthy, and the line up the first base line is extending out to Roosevelt Avenue. When we introduce the sous chef, that's when I've got to hold myself back from laughing because that's who the crowd gives the biggest cheer for.
Tremendous.
So we didn't do that yesterday, and I think there's a protocol that the league enforces that prohibited that. But who knows? Maybe next round if there is one.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be Alonso, which is why I asked. My sister, who was there early enough, said it was Lindor, so I figured so either Lindor or Alonso got the biggest ones. But I just thought Alonso off that magical moment there that maybe he would get the loudest ovation.
Yeah, just a decibel here, decibel there.
Yeah, thanks, Howie. We appreciate it.
My pleasure, guys.
Thanks, man.
Well,
Howie's appearance was brought to you by Bigelow Tea. Grab a mug and tea proudly. Unfortunately, I couldn't get there in time for that, but I was looking forward to it.
I saw your video, though, when you were there.
Yeah,
you posted up on Instagram, having a little fun with that.
Busting Evan's chops because he couldn't go there.
Evan was working, Sal was hanging.
The place was lit, though.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Like the energy, I told you, we talked about it. Singing the Lindor song there, the My Girl song, the Jose chant for Iglesias.
MVP chants.
Alonso, Pete, Alonso. Usually I'm not into that, the roll call for the player's name. Like I get that's the Yankees thing. I just never liked it myself. But in this particular case, it was pretty freaking cool to hear 45,000 Met fans chanting Pete Alonso. Well deserved.
Given his road for sure.
Right.
There's no doubt. It did fit. It was applicable there. I know we got a break, but Howie's point about the 86 team and how it gets stale almost talking about that all the time.
Those guys are tired of hearing about it.
Dude, I get it because, my point of reference, and it's such a smaller level, but, St. John's, I don't want to talk about the Final Four from 85. Chris Mullin's 60 years old. I want to talk about something new.
Yeah.
And, whether it's the Mets or the Jets or St. John's or even the Islanders in terms of winning, it just gets old, those old reference points. We love them. They mean so much. They shaped our fandom, but give us something new.
Yeah, it's just weird for me to say that because it's all I've known. I mean, I was 7 years old in 1986, so